This is my second lesson teaching ground school for private pilot. If you guys didn't watch my first video, I did aerodynamics. I'm teaching these so that I can get better at teaching for my CFI journey and then also to review the information. I know that reviewing the information and then teaching it back to someone really helps to help the information stick in your brain. So that's why I'm doing all of this, and I also want to help you guys. So today we're doing operation of systems. So these are the topics we're gonna go over. They're all gonna tie into each other, so we're not gonna do like different sections. We're just gonna go through the whole lesson. But primary and secondary flight controls, trim tabs, power plant and propeller, landing gear, fuel oil and hydraulic, electrical, avionics, including autopilot, pitot system, gyro and vacuum instruments, environmental, de-icing and anti-icing. So when I was learning operations of systems, it was one of the things that I understood the least when I was doing ground training, that and weather. And so I did a ground with a different instructor, and they actually took me out to the airplane and showed me the engine and how everything works and all of that, and really just walked me through while we're actually looking at the plane we're flying at, so I could put what we're learning to a picture and correlate it to the plane. So we're gonna start off with primary and secondary flight controls. So primary flight controls are the ones that you're using every time that you go to fly. So that is our elevator, ailerons, and rudder. Now our secondary flight controls, like flaps, trim, spoilers. Now, secondary flight controls aren't needed to fly the plane, but they are helpful for us, and we do use them a lot. We almost always use flaps when we're landing. You don't have to use them though. You could do a landing without putting any flaps in, which is why it's secondary. We don't need it. Trim is helpful so that we don't have to be fighting the plane. We can get it trimmed out for a straight and level, and that takes like one thing kind of off of our plate so that we're able to focus our attention on multiple things as we're flying. Okay, so now I'm gonna dive just a little bit deeper into each of these. So our elevator is on the tail of the plane. So we have the back of the plane, and then underneath, that is our elevator. And when we move the yoke, it's going to move the elevator up and down, and that's going to help us pitch up or down. So if we pull back on the yoke, it's going to make us pitch up because of the elevator movement, and if we push down on the yoke, it's going to make us pitch down, and that moves us about our lateral axis. So I'm just going to draw a quick airplane over here. Elevator is somewhere back there. Sorry, my drawings are terrible, but the elevator is moving us about this axis. That's lateral. So imagine this is the plane, and we're pitching like this and like this. This is the axis that it's moving about, right here. Then we have ailerons. Ailerons are all the way on the ends of our wings. The flaps are going to be on the inner part of the wings, but the ailerons are all the way on the outside, and they move us about the longitudinal axis. And our longitudinal axis is this one right there. That's when we move the yoke side to side. So if we turn the yoke to the left, it's going to cause the plane to turn left. Turn it to the right, it's going to cause the plane to turn right. So if it's about the longitudinal axis, which is the axis that goes right up and down the plane, when we turn left and we turn right, it's rolling about that axis. So it's the best way I can describe it. And then we have rudder, which is also on the tail. So the elevator is kind of down here at the bottom, and then on this part of our plane that sticks up, the rudder is right here on the back side, and it goes up and down. And it moves us about the vertical. When we use a rudder pedals on the floor, which is what our feet are on, if we push it to the right, it's gonna make the nose of the plane go right. And it's gonna make if you push it on the left pedal, it's gonna make the nose of the plane go left. What it's doing is yawing the plane. That's the correct term. And since it's moving us about the vertical axis, it's the axis that goes straight through the plane from the ground to the sky. So it's this axis right here. So basically, imagine this is our plane, the axis is going straight through. Basically, the rudder is just doing this to the plane, so it's moving about that axis. As far as flaps go, flaps, like I said, are on the inside of the wings. We put flaps in either manually, hydraulically, electrically. My plane has a little switch and you just lower it and that lowers the flaps down. We lower our flaps down in increments of degrees. So usually when you're coming in on downwind to land, you put in 10 degrees of flaps, and then base you put in 20, and then finally put in 30. Again, it's all personal preference. You don't have to put that many flaps in, but flaps allow us to descend quicker and at a steeper angle without increasing our airspeed. Because as we know, when we pitch our nose down, it's going to increase our airspeed, but we don't want our airspeed to be super fast on final when we're coming into land, because then we're going to come flying in and it's probably not going to be the nicest touchdown. So what flaps do is it allows us to slow the plane down, be able to come into land at the angle that we want and point our nose at the numbers, but without letting our airspeed get too high. So we're still coming in at that 65, 60 knots of airspeed, but we have the correct pitch angle with our flaps. Also, just a little side note, flaps are a great thing to use if you're doing power 180, short field landings, anything like that. If you're coming into land and you feel like you're still in ground effect floating for a long time and you feel like you're going to pass over your touchdown point, throw in another notch of flaps and it'll cause you to slow and hit your touchdown point. Trim can be done manually or electrically. That's the only type of trim that I've used. But basically when you're flying, we use trim when we're getting into straight and level flight. So we're climbing, once the plane levels out, we're gonna pull the power to our cruise power, we're gonna get our pitch angles set so that we're flying at the right airspeed, our power is set correctly, and then if we're still fighting the plane to keep the nose pitched down, we'll throw in a little bit of trim down, and what that will do is allow the plane's nose to stay at the pitch angle that we want it at, so that we don't have to fight the yoke to keep it in straight and level. I hope I'm not going too fast or like saying that really confusingly, but it'll allow us to trim out the plane. We're gonna get into our power plant and propeller. So to start off with the power plant, our power plant is our engine. There's an acronym that you can use to help you remember the different components of our power plant. So basically the acronym is L, hand. So this is for the type of engine, so it's Lycoming, which not everyone's going to be Lycoming, but then we have horizontally opposed. Horizontally opposed means we have 4 cylinders, and so 2 cylinders are on one side, 2 cylinders on the other. Then we have air cooled, which means that our engine is cooled by air. Oil also helps to cool our engine, but there's air that comes in as we're flying that cools the engine down. And then we have normally aspirated, which means that our engine is not turbocharged or anything like that. And then this is direct drive. Then we get into propeller. So the type of propeller. So the type of propeller, why can I not say that you have is different. So I think mine was a Sensenich. There's also Macaulay, but you can just go through your aircraft's maintenance books and figure out what type of propeller it is. Most are going to be 2-blade. Mine is a 2-blade, just meaning there's 2 blades that come off the propeller. So then when you start getting into learning about the different types of propellers and what they can do, this will make more sense, but the one you're using is probably fixed pitch, meaning you can't adjust the pitch of the blade angle. So if you don't know this already, the propeller blades are slightly angled and like curved, and that is set by the manufacturer. Some propellers, like constant speed propellers, you can adjust the pitch of the propellers. My plane, we're not fancy like that, we just have fixed pitch. So then when you like actually start looking at your own propeller and all of the different things about it, you also figure out the size of the propeller in inches, I believe, or whatever, and there is also a size listed in your POH of your aircraft for the propeller, and that's the minimum size that it can be shaved down to. So I think it's very interesting about the propellers is if you get a nick or like a little small crack on the edge of your propellers, the maintenance people can shave it down so that it's no longer a problem. But there's listed in your POH a minimum measurement that it can be shaved down to. If it has to be shaved any further than that, then you just have to get a new propeller blade. Okay, my phone just died mid explaining the power plant and of our plane and how the engine starts, and so I just left my notes up and I'm gonna go through it. If you want further explanation on how the engine starts, watch a video with like good images and stuff like that because it'll really help, but this is the best that I could do. Okay, so to start, we have our mags. So this is where we put our key in. So there's an off, left, right, and both. So we run on the both, but when we're doing run up, we try the left and we try the right to make sure they're both running properly, but we run on the both. So basically, when we turn our mags, it engages our starter motor. Our starter motor is going to turn the crankshaft, and the crankshaft, since it's directly connected to the propeller, is going to make the propeller turn. Our mags are also sending a spark to ignite the cylinders. So we have our 4 cylinders here. They're horizontally opposed, so they're across from each other. So it's sending the spark to ignite the cylinders. Before we even turn the mags, we are going to have the battery on, the mixture is going to be rich, and the primer, we're going to prime the engine. So what the primer does is it sends fuel directly to the cylinders to allow it to ignite better. This helps in cold conditions, definitely. Mixture is our fuel to air ratio. So when we're flying, we're taking off, landing, doing maneuvers, we'll have our mixture full rich, which means full fuel. But when we're flying straight and level, stuff like that, we'll have it leaned out a little bit so that there's a balance between the fuel to air ratio, so that there's a sweet spot, because if our mixture is too rich, we can foul the spark plugs, it can cause combustion issues with the engine and bad fuel economy, just all the things. My phone is about to die again, so we're gonna do this really quickly because I have to leave my house. But our battery is gonna be on because it assists in starting the engine. Our battery doesn't have to be on to power the engine, but it helps in assisting the startup. So the carburetor, which your plane can be carburetor or fuel injected, my plane is carburetor. So what that does is it mixes the fuel and air. So it's connected to the mixture. So basically what it does is it draws air in through a venturi. A venturi is something that looks like this. It gets really narrow, so as air is trying to move through something really narrow, it speeds up. And basically what it does is it pulls fuel into the airstream because it's speeding up and it's causing suction, pulls the air in, mixes the fuel in the air. So we've sent the fuel directly to the cylinders, mixture is rich, our battery's on, and now what we need to do is crank the mags. So when we start the mags, it's engaging the starter motor, and it's also sending a spark to ignite the cylinders. So basically what happens inside the cylinders is this: suck, squeeze, bang, blow. And it's not what you think, it's just an easy way to remember it. Basically what happens is there's already fuel sitting in there from the primer. When we crank this, it sucks air in to the cylinders and the air gets compressed. And with the air being compressed, mixed with the spark that's coming from the mags, we're going to have a bang. So there's going to be a controlled explosion in the cylinders, and that's what's going to cause our engine to start running. And then blow just means the exhaust air is being blown out, and then basically the air just expands and gets compressed inside the cylinders, which keeps our engine running, which is why we don't need the battery. And yeah, Okay, really quick, I'm gonna explain landing gear because I have to leave my house right now. But landing gear is pretty simple. I'm not gonna get into retractable landing gear or anything like that because I feel like during my private pilot studying, I didn't really learn too much about retractable just because my plane has fixed. So basically, don't judge this. But underneath here we have a tricycle. We have a tricycle type landing gear. So we have two that come out at an angle underneath, like kind of where we sit in the plane. So where the pilot and the co-pilot would be sitting. And two wheels back there, and then we have one in the front. So this is our nose wheel. And when we land, we touch down on our back. Wheels, and then we slowly allow the nose wheel to come down whenever we slow down the plane enough. If you let the nose wheel come down too quick, you could damage it, and yeah, we just want to slow the plane down before. My landing gear is hydraulic. So what happens is when we push the brake pedals that are inside the cockpit, the brake pedals are at the top, steering is at the bottom. So when we push on the top where the brake pedals are, it sends hydraulic fluid through the brake lines, and the brake lines are connected to our wheels, and on our wheels next to it there's a brake pad. So it's just like a little pad next to our wheels. The hydraulic fluid comes through the brake lines, connects to the brake pad, and then that pressure from the fluid causes the brake pad to squeeze against the wheel, and then that's what slows the wheels down. So we have the hydraulic, it's what they call it is, it's called hydraulically activated disc type brakes. On the nose wheel there's a strut. Which just allows for if we were to hit down on the nose wheel, it allows it to move in there without hitting against things that shouldn't be hitting. Try not to slam on your nose wheel. We have the hydraulically activated disc type brakes, which is our hydraulic braking, which is connected directly to our wheels and slows us down that way. We really want to make sure we're not using our brakes a ton, like our brake pedals when we're taxiing, because if we use it a lot, it's going to wear down those brake pads, and then we won't be able to stop ourselves when we really need to stop. We also have aerodynamic braking. So basically, when you land, you should use a combination of aerodynamic braking and hydraulic braking. So we have aerodynamic braking, which is controlled with our elevator. So when we come into land and we touch down, we're going to want to use hydraulic brakes, our feet, and our aerodynamic braking, which is our elevator. So our elevator is controlled by our yoke. So to deflect our elevator, we're going to pull the yoke back. So as soon as we touch down, we're using the top of our pedals to push down and brake, and we're also pulling back on the yoke so that the elevator can assist in braking with that aerodynamic braking. That way the plane is not being completely stopped by just the brake pads, because they would get worn out really quickly down. That's all I'm going to say about landing gear and braking. I might have to do a second part of this YouTube video because I have to go, but hopefully I'll have it posted by tonight.